Dracula, Chapter 4, page 47 to 54. Jonathan Harker's journal continued. I awoke in my own bed. If last night's horror was not a dream, then the Count must have carried me here. But I could not be sure. I did notice that my watch was not wound up, and I always wind it the last thing before going to bed. But this is no proof. In fact, it might only mean that I was not in my right mind. I am glad about one thing. If the Count did indeed carry me in here, he must have been in a hurry, because my diary is still safe in my pocket. If he had found it, surely he would have either taken it or destroyed it. Although this room has been to me so full of fear, it now seems like a place of safety. For nothing can be more dreadful than those awful women who are, waiting to suck my blood. May 18th. I have been down to look at that room again in daylight, for I must know the truth. When I got to the door at the top of the stairs, I found it closed and locked. It had been forced into place with such strength that the wood at its top was splintered. This was no dream. May 19th. My troubles grow worse. Last night the Count asked me, in the most polite way, to write 3 letters. The first was to say that my work here was nearly done, and that I would start for home within a few days. The second said that I was leaving the next morning from the time of the letter. And in the third, I wrote that I had left the castle and arrived at Bistritz. I wanted to rebel, but I felt that it would be madness to quarrel with the Count while I am so absolutely in his power. And to refuse would be to make him suspicious. He would realize that I know too much, and that I must not live to tell anyone. My only chance is to play for more time. Something may occur which will give me a chance to escape. In explaining why he wanted me to write the letters, the Count said the chances of sending letters from this area were few and uncertain, and so that my writing now would make sure my friends did not worry unnecessarily later. I pretended to believe him, and asked what dates I should put on the letters. He calculated a minute and then said, "The first should be June 12th, the second June 19th, and the third June 29th. I know now how long he intends for me to live. God help me." May 28th. There is a chance of escape, or at any rate of my being able to send word home. A band of gypsies have come to the castle and are camped in the courtyard. I do not understand their language, but I shall write some letters home and try to persuade the gypsies to send them for me. I have already spoken to them through my window. They took their hats off and bowed and made signs to me, although I could not understand anything that they meant. I have written the letters. Mina's is in shorthand. I have explained to her my situation very briefly. In my letter to Mr. Hawkins, I simply ask him to contact her. If the Count should see the letters, then he would still not know how much I have learned about him. I have given the gypsies the letter. I threw them through the bars of my window with a gold piece, and made what signs I could to have them mailed. The man who took them pressed them to his heart and bowed, and then put them in his cap. I can do no more. I went back to the study and began to read. The Count has come. He sat down beside me and said in his smoothest voice as he opened the letters, "The gypsies have given me these. I don't know where they come from, but I shall, of course, take care of them. See here." He must have looked at it. "One is from you, and to my friend Peter Hawkins. The other," here he caught sight of the shorthand as he opened the envelope, and the dark look came into his face, and his eyes blazed wickedly. "The other is a vile thing, an outrage upon friendship and hospitality. It is not signed. Well, so it cannot matter to us." And he calmly held the letter and envelope in the flame of the lamp till they were consumed. Then he went on, "Of course I shall send on your letter to Hawkins. Your letters are sacred to me. Please pardon me, my friend, for opening it. Will you not address it again?" He held out the letter to me, and with a courteous bow, handed me a clean envelope. I could only do as he asked, and handed it to him in silence. When he went out of the room, I could hear the key turn softly. A minute later I went over and tried it, and the door was locked. An hour or two later, the Count quietly returned to the room. His coming awakened me, for I had gone to sleep on the sofa. He was very courteous and cheery. Seeing that I had been sleeping, he said, "So, my friend, you are tired? Get to bed. I may not have the pleasure of talking with you tonight, since I have so much work to do. I hope you will sleep well." I went to my room, and strange to say, slept without dreaming. Despair has its own kind of calm. This morning I thought I would take some papers and envelopes from my bag and keep them in my pocket, in case I have another chance to write a letter. But another shock. Every scrap of paper was gone, and with it all my notes, my records, my train schedules, in fact, everything that might be useful to me if I were outside the castle. I sat and thought a while. Then I had another thought, and I went to check my suitcase and the closet in which I had placed my clothes. The suit in which I had traveled was gone, and also my overcoat and traveling blanket. I could find no trace of them anywhere. June 17. This morning, as I was sitting on the edge of my bed, I heard a cracking of whips and pounding and scraping of horses' hoofs. With joy, I hurried to the window and saw 2 great wagons drive into the yard, each drawn by 8 sturdy horses. Each wagon was driven by a peasant wearing a wide hat, dirty sheepskin, and high boots. I ran to the window and called out to them. They looked up at me stupidly and pointed, but just then the head man of the gypsies came out. Seeing them pointing to my window, he said something, and they laughed. After that, nothing I said or did would make them even look at me. They turned their backs. The wagons contained some square boxes with handles of thick rope. From the easy way the peasants handled them, and by the hollow noises they made as they banged on the ground, it was clear that they were empty. When the boxes were all unloaded and packed in a great heap in one corner of the yard, the gypsy gave the peasants some money. Shortly afterwards, I heard the cracking of their whips die away in the distance. June 24th. Last night, the Count left me early and locked himself into his own room. As soon as I dared, I ran up the winding stair and looked out of the window. I thought I would watch for the Count, for there is something going on. The gypsies are staying somewhere in the castle and are doing work of some kind. I know it, for now and then I hear a faraway muffled sound as of digging. I had been at the window a little less than half an hour when I saw something coming out of the Count's window. I drew back and watched carefully, and saw the whole man emerge. It was a new shock to me to find that he was wearing my traveling clothes, and slung over his shoulder was a traveling bag. I knew at once what he was up to. He will travel about, allowing others to see someone they think is me. That will create evidence that I have left the castle and gone into the towns mailing my own letters. Furthermore, any wickedness which he may do will be blamed on me. It makes me rage to think that this can go on while I am shut up here. Even a prisoner in jail as the protection of the law, I have none. I thought I would watch for the Count's return, and for a long time I sat at the window. Then I began to notice that there were some little specks floating in the rays on the moonbeams. They were like the tiniest grains of dust, and they whirled round and gathered in cloudy clusters. As I watched them, a sense of calm stole over me. I leaned back in a more comfortable position so that I could enjoy the sight more fully. Down below in the valley, the howling of dogs reached my ears. I sat up. The sound became louder, and the floating clouds of dust seemed to take new shapes as they danced in the moonlight. Even as sleep tugged at my eyelids, I felt myself struggling, fighting against something I didn't understand. I was becoming hypnotized. Quicker and quicker danced the dust. The moonbeams seemed to quiver as they passed by me. More and more they gathered until they seemed to take dim, ghostly shapes, and then I jumped up, wide awake, and ran screaming from the place. The phantom shapes, which were gradually emerging from the moonbeams, were those 3 ghostly women. I ran to my room where there was no moonlight and where the lamp was burning brightly. When a couple of hours had passed, I heard something moving in the Count's room, and then a sharp wail, which was quickly cut off, and then there was silence, deep, awful silence, which chilled me. With a beating heart, I tried the door, but I was locked in my prison and could do nothing. I sat down and simply cried.